The British developed an economic interest in India and its tradable commodities in the 1600s. These commodities included tea, coffee, cotton, and opium. The current ruling dynasty at that time was called the Mughal dynasty. This dynasty began to collapse in the early 1700s and was then unable to maintain control over European traders. By this time, the British had set up trading posts at various points in India. When several smaller states successfully broke away from the Mughal dynasty, they allied themselves with the French to defend themselves against British forces. Their efforts were futile, however, and in 1757 Robert Clive and his troopers led a victory over India and its French allies at the Battle of Plassey, thus making the East India Trading Company the leading power. The area of dominance of the East India Trading Company grew and grew. The British government's involvement with the company was only an official one. There was hardly any interference at all. The East India Trading Company possessed its own army of Indian soldiers called sepoys. Britain saw mostly potential in India because of its abundance of raw materials and heavy population, or potential workforce. Britain did not allow India to run its own economic system. They would not allow India to compete, so they had to produce raw materials and purchase British finished goods. Many small businesses were forced to close because of the goods imported from England. Eventually, the British set up a railroad system in India, thus making it easier to transport raw goods to England and making India even more valuable. England was able to maintain a trade relationship with nations at war, providing them with the goods they were not able to obtain when their other trade routes were cut off. British power over India caused economic woes for India, as well as famines due to the cash crops policy. Indian farmers were unable to produce for their own families. With the development of railroad systems also came roads, telephones, bridges, and other modern conveniences. Schools were built, and the situation of India's public health improved. British troops also helped maintain order. However, by the 1850s, the Indian people were growing tired of the British influence. They found the British to be racist and did not appreciate what they perceived to be an attempt to convert them to Christianity. The Indian sepoys, made up of Hindu and Muslims, got wind of gossip detailing how the cartridges of their new rifles were greased with beef and pork fat. They were required to bite the end of the cartridge to use them, and were deeply offended as Muslims don't eat pork and Hindus view cows as sacred. In return, they refused to use the cartridges. The British arrested the offending sepoys. On May 10, 1857, the remaining sepoys and other Indian soldiers captured the Indian city of Delhi. From there, they moved to north and central India. Fighting lasted more than a year between the sepoys and the British. The British government was forced to step in and send military help. The sepoys could not maintain a united front between the Hindus and Muslims, and the British ultimately prevailed. The British government then tightened their grip on India. They ruled from 1757 till 1947. The Sepoy Uprising resulted in a heightened sense of racism by the British, and increased distrust between Indians and British. In the 1800s, Indian resettlement of the British began to grow again. They wished for more independence and more modernization. They also wanted more equal pay. In the early 1900s, nationalist groups called for self-government, and conflict over control continued for many years.